Hello everyone, my name is Luca De Michele. I'm going to put a very quick caveat out there in the first minute. I'm not a data engineer. So if anyone's expecting a really in-depth chat about data engineering, I massively apologise. It may be a great time to go and get another beer. So I am in fact a BI manager. So I work in BI at The Economist. I previously used to work at a consultancy called Keras, and my whole time there was spent working at PlayStation. I then moved over to The Economist to help with their migration from ClickSense to Tableau. I've been there for 3 years, started off as an analyst, and I am now a BI manager. Next slide, please. So a little bit about The Economist. If anyone hasn't heard of The Economist, it's a very large British news publication, which was founded in 1843. So it's been around for a very long time. It has, we have lost slides. I'll just carry on talking while we go. So the Economist now has 1.7k employees. We're back. It's headquartered in London, which is where I work, but we also have offices all over the globe. And we currently have 1.25 million subscribers. So in terms of products, obviously it started off with just a newspaper, but we now have a weekly edition that kind of goes across print, and we also have on digital, so on our app and on the website. We also have a daily shorter form news app called Espresso. We've recently launched a premium podcast subscription, and we've also just launched a video platform called Insider, which is available to our core subscribers. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving on quickly to data at The Economist. So data is something that has changed quite a lot at The Economist in my time there and kind of since before I joined. We'll come on to a few of the structural changes and behavioural changes and how we've decided to optimise the data team in a little bit, but obviously it can come to a data engineering talk with a little bit on our data stack and our architecture. So before 2022, which was before my time there, our data at The Economist wasn't particularly optimised. So we used to use Talend for ETL, which I'm told wasn't particularly customisable. We used Snowflake, but our assets in Snowflake weren't particularly useful. We also had various SQL servers kind of dotted around everywhere. They were just burning money and nobody really knew what they did. We migrated from ClickView to ClickSense for reporting, but in truth, the dashboards that we had weren't particularly useful either. A significant amount of transformation was done in the BI layer. So I joined and I was the only person who knew how to use ClickSense at the entire business. And pretty much all our reporting was still done on it when I joined. It was a very stressful time. Do not miss it at all. But thankfully, we went through a data democratization process around 2022 with the kind of goal to optimize the data assets that we had. So we adopted a Kindle methodology, introduced clear layering, so kind of cleanse, conform to derived, and then defined kind of business metrics and then data assets. So these sat in Snowflake. We use Airflow for orchestration. I know Hugo won't be particularly happy about that. And then we migrated to Tableau. So we took all of our transformation out of the BI layer and put that into Snowflake, which made my life an awful lot easier. Moving on to 2025, we've moved to a lakehouse architecture. So everything from my side in BI is the same, so Tableau still connects up to Snowflake. But obviously with rising Snowflake costs, we've then switched to using Apache Iceberg on S3. We now use Spark for computes, and Snowflake then reads the Iceberg tables, and then we can do analytics on Snowflake as we did before. And we've also moved to a medallion architecture. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit around a few changes we've made in the data team to help us run a little bit smoother. So the first one is around aligning the data team. So when I joined, all of the different disciplines, so like BI, engineering, data science, insights, they all operated in their own horizontals. So everyone had their own separate priority lists, their own Jira boards, and this kind of stuff. Obviously, people collaborated on certain projects, but there was a distinct misalignment between these functions. Say, for example, the stakeholders I was working with in BI would say, we really need this something urgently. I would then go to data engineering and say, can you build me a view? They'll tell me that they don't have any capacity for a month or two because their stakeholders are wanting something else. So moving on to 2024, we had a new CDO who joined, and he put in place a structural change across the data team to align us to business verticals. So these are B2C acquisition, which is where I work in. There's B2C retention, which splits into retention and engagement. And then we also have verticals to support our B2B and impact arms of the business. So representatives from each of the functions moved into these different verticals. So in acquisition, for example, we have a couple of people from BI, a couple of people from engineering, and so on. This allowed us to set priorities at the vertical and squad level. So it meant that we can align to business goals and the key stakeholders within those business areas. So when priorities change, which they often do, this is governed at that squad level, so we can all align and kind of work towards these new priorities together. This obviously fostered a lot more collaboration between teams, and it meant that we all gained a little bit more cross-discipline understanding. So I understood much better how the data engineering teams work, they understood how we worked, and it meant that we could work together considerably more fluidly. This also resulted in a deeper knowledge of the business area itself. So before you're kind of working on bits and bobs across the business, for me now I understand acquisition across the business and the data that we have on it much more deeply, and it enables me to help the business with analytics a lot further. Okay, next slide please. Okay, so the next problem I want to talk about is speed to delivery. And this is something that we struggled with considerably when we started to move into this vertical structure. We had to shift our kind of ways of working together. So as with a lot of businesses, we're often met with pretty hard deadlines, especially with things such as product launches. We had a bit of a culture within the data team where we would not be allowed to access any data until it was fully in production, which does kind of make sense. But when you couple that with low engineering capacity and often engineering delays, it puts a lot of pressure on the kind of BI teams, the insights team, who have a complete dependency on the assets that engineering are produced. So we kind of sat down with the engineering team to kind of figure out how we could solve this problem. One of the first solutions that we came with, the engineers suggested that we could connect to sandbox tables. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be putting any of that analytics out to the business, but what this allowed us to do was they would create a table in Sandbox. It would have the correct structure. They'll say, obviously, they're going to go and put a lot of tests onto that data. They'll go through kind of peer review process. But whilst they're doing that, it allowed us to work in parallel. So we could kind of build the analytics that we want to build on top of it. The structure's not going to change, maybe a column name will change, but other than that, as soon as the work's been productionized, it meant that we could connect and repoint to the productionized asset. And then at the point we usually be starting analytics, we can actually potentially be finishing our analytics. So it's massively sped up our speed to delivery. The next one is providing dummy data or test data when we're doing new product launches. Naturally, when you're launching a new product, you do not have any data on it, but people naturally would like to see data from day one. So one thing we did initially, we've just launched the Insider video platform. The engineers actually, once they built the structure out of the views that we would be connecting to, they actually plugged this with podcast data. Now this obviously looks and behaves fairly similar to the video data, and this allowed me to build a full suite of analytics to be launched on day one. So when we were a day out from the launch, I quite simply just connected to the productionized data source. This was obviously blank initially, but as soon as we started to get data, people had business and all of our business users were happy. Finally, we've enabled business teams such as BI and Insights to write their own logic and SQL. This is something the business initially weren't too happy about happening, but this enabled, so often we would have a fairly big backlog, lots of ad hoc work, which isn't necessarily difficult logic. Most of us were fairly capable of writing SQL, but we worked with the engineers, so anyone who wasn't able to write SQL or needed a little bit of help were enabled and upskilled with that. Obviously, the rise of AI helps with that as well. And it meant that we could kind of enable ourselves to write our own ad hoc logic, and we take some capacity off the engineering teams so they can just spend time reviewing instead of having to work through the entire logic. Next slide, please. Okay, so finally we move on to the last issue I want to discuss. This is my personal favourite, which is the discovery and enablement problem. Now, a lot of people in the room will spend a lot of time building data assets for analytics to be built on top of. And the issue that a lot of companies face is that people do a lot of analytics on top of that. At The Economist, we literally have hundreds of dashboards, and I'm sure many of the companies that people work in the audience have the same problem. For business users, this is a problem. People don't know what exists. They don't know where to go to answer questions. They don't know how to answer questions. The logic and metric definitions are often unclear. You might have 5 dashboards which all feature the same metric. The truth is they might all genuinely have a use case, but if the business user doesn't understand them, then what's the point? This often leaves data teams inundated with questions. They have to spend a lot of time figuring out how to answer those questions. It leads to a lot of repeat work. And in truth, the answers often already exist, but that people just don't know where to find them. So this is something we've created partial solutions to in The Economist. The first one is we've adopted Amplitude for our product analytics. So we've upskilled business users to be able to use this and do their own analytics in this tool. And this has also released an analytics agent within the tool, which makes this even easier. We've started building AI agents in Snowflake Cortex on top of our business data. This allows us to kind of move towards this agentic BI future. So we're able to take some ad hoc questions out of dashboards and put them straight into people's hands so they can answer them straight off the bat. Finally, we've adopted a tool called Stravito, which is we're using as our insight hub. So you can upload various like research, insight, and analytics decks. So when people do add-on analytics, that can then be resurfaced. You can also add links to this. So this is what we're using as a dashboard library. Now, these are all great tools in isolation, but they don't necessarily fully solve the problem. So Amplitude and Cortex are both very good at answering the questions they're able to answer, but they only answer a subset of your business's questions. Amplitude can do product analytics brilliantly. Cortex can only answer the questions that you've built it to answer. So what happens when someone has a question that isn't in that wheelhouse? People don't know how to answer them. Now, Stravito is designed to sit on top, but the truth is it is not designed to house analytics assets. It's very good for DAX, but when you add dashboards, they're not even surfaced in the product's AI assistant. So it doesn't necessarily help with discovery. So I've been trying to build some solutions. I built a couple of solutions. The first one is internal, and that is using Gemini. So Gemini is the LLM that our company has full company-wide access to. So what I've started to do is build deep documentation on the assets that we have in Amplitude and in Tableau as well. So this is kind of very deep documentation. So this is going down to the level of what charts we have in each dashboard page, the filters, and the genuine, like the kind of context behind why decisions have been made with that dashboard. And then essentially putting that into a big document and surfacing that in an LLM. Very simple solution, but people are very excited about this because it enables them to start answering some of their own questions. But this, again, is not a perfect solution. Obviously, this then sits in your LLM. It isn't a default kind of portal that people go to answer their business questions. So it's fairly one-dimensional. You can't kind of connect to different metrics, relies a lot on people maintaining it. So if you move to the final slide, I would like to introduce a solution that I've been working on in my own time. I'm currently building a platform which is called Intera. Now, the concept behind this is it will be a neutral context layer that sits across all of your analytics assets. Now, let's take, for example, you have a company which has, let's say, Tableau, for example, as their legacy BI tool. They might be moving to a more modern BI tool, whether that be a migration or whether it's used to answer some questions whilst the old one answers some other questions. They may have started to build analytics, say in Cortex, for example, building agents as well. They may have a web analytics tool like Google Analytics or something like that. As you move towards a more agentic kind of BI world, a lot of companies are going to find that this just introduces more platforms, more places to get answers. And whilst the capability massively increases, business users may find themselves a little bit more lost than they were before. So the idea with Intera is this will allow you to connect your analytics assets from across all of your different platforms, the ones I've mentioned. It enables you to provide deep structured documentation of your analytics assets. This will be AI assisted to make this as seamless as possible because nobody likes documentation. But it would also be human layered to make sure that all the nuances of your different assets is captured. It will treat metrics as a first-class asset and put them into the hands of your business users. A little bit like a data catalog, so people can go in and find it, but it's actually in the hands of your business users. It will not only give you the definitions of metrics, but it will actually also create relationships between metrics, so you can find out what metrics drive other metrics, and you can start to dig into the why of analytics and not just the what. It also creates relationships between metrics and dashboards, metrics and AI agents, and all of your AI solutions going forward. So this means that if you have a metric that has 5 dashboards, 3 agents that can answer questions on that, you can be routed towards the best one to answer your question. This is all underpinned by conversational AI. It allows you to ask a business question, and it will route you to the right asset, whatever that may be. It also flags unanswered questions and allows you to expose gaps in your analytics so data teams know what they should be building next. Now, this is very much an early days product. It's something that I built an MVP for. I'm starting to kind of push out some validation, and hopefully it's something I can release this year. That is the phase one of the tool, but the kind of full vision and the end goal for it is that it will provide full orchestration across your dashboards, agents, and any AI tools you build around data in the future. And your answers will be surfaced in one place, regardless of the source. So there's a flow diagram that kind of demonstrates that. So obviously users will have a business question, and Terra acts as the context layer and can decide exactly what tool is the best to use. If an agent is the best option and the answer can be surfaced immediately, it will route to that agent and provide you the answer in the same interface. If a dashboard, an existing asset, is a better place to answer it, it will route you to that dashboard and tell you how to answer your question within that dashboard. If you want to answer any kind of questions on metrics or get any context, it can provide that as well. And then again, finally, if it's not able to answer your question, it will note down the gap and use that to give to data teams. Now, I'm going to pause there, as I imagine I'm probably fairly over time. But I just want to mention, if this is something that interests anyone, or it's a problem that your data team faces, please do come and have a chat with me. I'll be around after this, or drop me a message on LinkedIn, because I would love to speak to as many people about this product as possible and about the problem. Also, if anyone knows any good software engineers, please let me know. That would be really useful. Finally, I just want to thank Orchestra for inviting me down. I want to thank you all for listening. Before I close, does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
You described the medallion architecture, your like house architecture, in the first slide.
Yeah.
You said that as a BI analyst, when you need to ask questions, give answers to some questions that you have in your head, you are unable to do it. Would it be fair to say, because from creation, from the source to the destination, because it has to go through multiple layers, you actually lose a bit of consistency, or maybe like having access to the rawest form of data in your organization gives you more scope for addressing those questions?
Yeah, potentially. I think there's always a lot more scope for questions that can be answered. I think naturally, so from a BI perspective, this is not something I get involved with too much. A lot of what we connect to would be the kind of gold, essentially mirroring kind of, we went from cleanse, conform to derived. That essentially mirrors that. So we occasionally would connect to like your conformed, but generally everything was derived assets. So I think naturally there is a lot more questions that can be answered, like you say, coming from the raw data. I think there's a lot more places that can be explored. I think answering that can kind of come from trying to understand exactly what your business needs and what they want. And I think flagging gaps in your analytics is a great way to do that. And you can kind of look backwards. I think you do raise a good point. I think probably us as BI and kind of insights professionals probably should have a little bit more context over the early kind of parts of your data and the raw format, because it means that then we know exactly what we have and the full breadth of the data that we have at the company. Because like I said, often we just look at the kind of your gold, kind of your end product. So yeah, I think that's a good point, and probably one I should go look a little bit further down the line and try and figure out exactly what we have.
What's your bronze layer? Is it like made of a real-time data solutions, for instance?
I would love to answer that, but I really do not know the answer. I have to be honest. Yes?
One clarification question. So you mentioned you mapped the relationship between metrics, dashboards, and agents.
Yes.
Do you mean like operational metrics or like the end user consumer metrics?
Yeah, so this is end user kind of consumer metrics. So let's say, for example, you have subscription starts at your company, for example. There's a metric I look at quite a lot. So the mapping relationships would be mapping to other metrics that maybe impact that. So say, for example, traffic would be a big impact on starts, maybe your add to basket or something along those lines. So it's mapping relationships to figure out exactly what can impact that metric. So you can start to figure out, if someone asks a question, why has that starts gone down? You can then start to go, all right, well, go have a look at traffic, see if there's been something go on there. In terms of then mapping to your assets, for example, so say you were to click on a metric, so let's take starts again, you can then see exactly what dashboards how's that metric, and then you can start to kind of put together the links between those dashboards and be like, say you just want to know starts by week, use this dashboard, it's like the source of truth. Or it could be the fact that you have an AI agent that answers simple questions on starts, so route to that. So it's just kind of creating relationships between it and trying to kind of get a little bit of understanding over when you should use which asset when for certain metrics.
And when, at what point do you create that mapping? Is it like, at runtime, or is it more like as a separate step in your application?
So I think once you add the metric, you're then able to connect that to various different dashboards. I think the additional layer with the context kind of comes as an additional step. So you can then connect it to. So I think once you make a metric, you can connect to different metrics. But then when you're starting adding dashboards, you then create that link to different dashboards, to different agents as you go along. Okay, if there's no more questions, I will hand back to Lewis. Thank you, everyone.